Welcome back. Always great to say hello to Michael Bratton. When we were in Nashville a couple weeks ago, I had a chance to go to one of his studios to tape a podcast, and I'm really glad to say that it didn't cost me too much in terms of perception damage. I mean, it was rough for a couple of weeks, but I got over it. Michael, how are you?
Hey, Paul, it's always an honor to join your show, and yeah, you came through to mine, so I appreciate the plug there.
I was really nervous too. I mean, it was. I mean, I've admired you for a long time. I was afraid you really did have pictures.
Well, I got to be honest, Paul. I don't know if I've ever sweat that much during an interview. So anybody that actually checked out the video, I apologize for all my perspiration.
It was fun though. I had a blast. Michael, thanks for being here. Let's get, Kiffin was on a few minutes ago complaining, talking about the current state of NIL, professionalism. He seemed to be even indicating that there could be some tampering going on for his best player. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but what do you make out of Lane Kiffin?
Well, last time I checked, Paul, they call him the Portal King, and they're not recruiting these guys via the transfer portal with milk and cookies or scholarship offers. I mean, they are just as invested as anybody in the NIL world, and he made a point to say that just about a week ago, Paul, when ESPN, I believe it was Alex Scarborough, did an outstanding piece on him, but he said, hey, thanks for all the rumors because that helped our NIL collective. So to me, Kiffin's talking out both sides of his mouth. He has said many times he supports players getting paid. Well, they're paying players down there at Ole Miss, and they're attracting them via the transfer portal. So I don't really understand the issue. I mean, I realize that maybe that's an excuse because November was just an epic collapse. They lost to every meaningful game they had at the end of the season, and what could have been a dream season was rather pedestrian. And last time I checked, the Egg Bowl resides in Starkville, Mississippi, thanks to Lane Kiffin and all those rumors that he could have put to bed weeks ago.
I would strongly disagree. Your phrase pedestrian. I think when you lose 5 games and when you're number 10, when you're in the top 10 in the country, it's even worse than that, Michael. Great. Let's talk about some other programs. I was amused by your tweets last night of the high-scoring shootout down at the Swamp. What did you make out of Billy Napier's second spring game?
Paul, can we put someone on the hot seat after a spring game? Because I don't think there were any winners last night in Gainesville. And yes, I did have some fun with it, but I was basically just tweeting out what was actually happening on the field. It was embarrassing. And, you know, I've been many times saying we need patience with Billy Napier. I like what they're doing on the recruiting trail. That's fantastic. And Florida fans should be fired up about all that. But when we sit here and we say maybe year 3, maybe year 4, when we got Josh Heupel turning around Tennessee, Shane Beamer turning around South Carolina, heck, Brian Kelly just won the SEC West in his first year at LSU. I mean, Billy Napier's got to get it done on the field, and it's not helping that his main rivals, back-to-back national champion, may win a third. Florida State is ascending as a top 10 team seemingly in the upcoming preseason. So, I mean, all these excuses are nice, but all he's really doing is loading the roster for the next coach if he can't get it done on the field.
Michael, one of your colleagues, I guess you consider Mike Griffith one of your colleagues, I don't know. He was on here the other day, and he went all in on poor old Saban, you know, saying Kirby has passed him by, and it became a inside the Beltway debate. You understand the debate. It's not about most national championships. It's about today moving forward. What do you think?
Well, I'm just happy that Saban has cleaned house and washed his hands from any responsibility that he may hold in Tuscaloosa, because it was not his fault that after a timeout, defense had 12 men on the field in the crucial play against LSU. It's not his fault. His team's averaging about 15 penalties on the road. That was all Pete Golding. That was all Bill O'Brien. So, hey, Saban back on top. But let's get back to reality, Paul. I've been saying this for about a year. Kirby Smart has surpassed Nick Saban, and I think it's clear when you watch these teams play, teams are afraid of Georgia, and they should, because they're just getting slaughtered by them. I don't see that fear when Alabama takes the field. Heck, Texas, and I have no respect for Tech. Well, I'll have respect for them once they get in the league, Paul, I promise. But I got no respect for Texas as a program, yet they should have beat Alabama last year. Tennessee beat them. LSU beat them. Texas A&M god-awful Jimbo Fisher play calling should have beat them if not for his horrendous play calling there with the game on the line. I mean, this is not a one-year issue. This is multiple-year issues where we're having to go into the portal to add key players, and once those players get injured or don't live up to the hype, Alabama doesn't live up to the hype. So, yeah, Kirby has surpassed Nick Saban. I think he did it about 12 months ago.
Michael, you know what the Bama fans say. They had the best recruiting class in the country. It was a hiccup maybe, but everything is back on track now with Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele. I know what you're going to say, but you do have to believe that Nick Saban has been down this road before. Why don't you? Are you suggesting he can't do it again, or it's just the fact that Kirby Smart has surpassed him? What is it?
Well, not only Kirby Smart, Paul, but I think Brian Kelly is quickly catching up to him. I think Josh Heupel, you could argue, he doesn't have the resume. I'm not sitting here saying Josh Heupel's got a better program necessarily, but beat him head to head last time I checked. And again, A&M has beaten them in recent history, and again, should have beat them last year despite being arguably the worst team in the SEC, and that's including Vanderbilt. So I don't know, Paul. I mean, these number one recruiting classes are great. They've been doing that for about a decade, and they had the number one class 2 years ago, and about 40% of that class is no longer within the program. And last offseason, we were singing the praises of Texas A&M and this vaulted number one class. It was the greatest ever assembled, and then they won 5 games. So you can't sell me on we just signed number one class and all ills are fixed, because Nick Saban, I think, has been caught up by many of his peers in the SEC, and it was bound to happen, Paul, because he's gotten about every coach fired, or every institution has fired their coach at least once, if not twice, and some as many as 3 or 4 times since Nick Saban's been in Tuscaloosa.
Talking to Michael Bratton, in case somebody was wondering who that voice was if you're driving around the country. Michael, you mentioned Jimbo Fisher. I take it you didn't like that play call at the end of the Alabama game last year, but let's talk about what's happening now and moving forward with Bob Petrino on board. What do you expect out of the Aggies?
Well, we're less than 24 hours away, Paul, from the first opportunity for Texas A&M to be a massive disappointment here in the spring game. Fortunately, they can't lose when they're playing themselves, but I kid, because I've heard you say this, and I would echo these sentiments, that Bobby Petrino, you may not necessarily trust him to do the right thing off the field, but I do trust him coaching quarterbacks, calling the offensive game plan, and that is the last thing that I trust Jimbo Fisher with. So as long as Jimbo doesn't steal the play calling back from Bobby Petrino, I really do think A&M could be one of the biggest surprises in the SEC this season, but it would only be about the 4th or 5th time someone has uttered that, and they have disappointed nearly every time. So it could go either way. I could see them potentially even winning the West, Paul. I could see them finishing dead last again, but it is going to be fun to watch as an outside observer, no doubt.
Michael, you mentioned Heupel a minute ago. I know you're high on that program. In fact, we saw you last year when we were doing the show from the Alabama weekend. Give us your view of this program moving forward now with seemingly the quarterback situation settling down.
Right, and I think something that everyone is overlooking when they talk about the Tennessee Vols going into the season, Paul, is this is going to be the deepest, most talented roster on overall, but especially on the defensive side of the ball that Josh Heupel has had. And I just think that is going to help keep them, given that Josh Heupel, it seems like every quarterback he works with just turns to gold. I think they'll do the same. I'm not sitting here saying Joe Milton will be the SEC's best quarterback, but given his experience, his knowledge of the system, and the return, we're just now getting to the point where these are Josh Heupel guys that are all over the field. He's basically been doing this with players he inherited his first 2 years on Rocky Top. So I look for that to continue. I think Tennessee's Georgia's biggest threat in the East, and I think Tennessee is here to stay, thanks in large part to Lane Kiffin may hate it, but Tennessee fans are loving NIL because they have one of the best NIL collectives in the game, and I think that's going to keep Tennessee here for years to come.
Michael, you talk to people from every school, and this is what you do on your podcast. Let's get a little bit deeper in the weeds. You mentioned A&M, LSU, Obviously, Tennessee, South Carolina, I know you're high on them. What else are you looking at this year in the SEC? Because everybody's great on August 14th, but that's not the case once we get to the season. Who are you concerned about?
You know, one team, Paul, that we just saw their spring game, and maybe I'm just reading too much into a spring game. It's always dangerous to do that, but it's the Florida Gators to me, Paul. And all this hype with Anthony Richardson, and he deserves all of it due to just his pure athleticism, the talent that NFL teams believe they can unlock within him. Well, Billy Napier sure as heck couldn't do it, at least not consistently. And without Anthony Richardson, I mean, it looks like a train wreck on offense. Either that, Paul, or maybe they've got the best defense in the SEC, which was one of the worst, but they just hired a new coordinator. So maybe that'll fix Florida's issues. They have an incredibly daunting schedule. They're replacing 4 or 5 on the offensive line, and that seemed to be a huge issue in the spring game. And that's kind of Billy Napier's bread and butter, is running the football. If they can't do that, they don't have a quarterback. I mean, I think we're possibly looking at a 4-8, 5-7 type season for the Florida Gators. And I just can't see that sitting well with that fan base that demands excellence.
I know they're living on recruiting, and they picked up a big commitment yesterday. But if Georgia continues to do what we both believe they're going to, in Tennessee, you've been pretty clear on that. I know you're high on Shane Beamer, who's picked up another big recruit in the last 24 hours. I mean, we're looking at a significant paradigm shift, are we not, with Florida? I mean, they are. Where are they right now in the SEC East in terms of your estimation?
I mean, they're battling with Missouri, and that's kind of sad to say if I'm a Florida fan. I mean, heck, you could even throw Vanderbilt in there. And, you know, I don't just jump out and say that because, heck, they lost to Vanderbilt. I mean, anytime you lose to and this is not the best Vanderbilt ever. This is a rebuilding Vanderbilt that had something like a 20-game SEC losing streak. You find a way to lose to them. I don't understand. And again, if Florida State, if Miami starts to emerge, it's going to be even tougher to recruit in that state. This is just, they're trying to do the Alabama-Georgia thing, but they're doing it without the players. So, yeah, I think you just have to try to do something different. That's what they're doing in Columbia, South Carolina. That's what they're doing in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's working for them. I just think we've come to the point, Paul, where Kirby and Nick Saban have kind of mastered this blueprint. And every time someone tries to mimic it, it fails miserably. And it's far too early to say Florida is going to be a disaster. But after a season, I mean, it certainly looks to be trending that way.
We'll leave it on that happy note. Michael Bratton from that SEC podcast. Michael, you be well. You take care of yourself and be secure after these comments.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul.
Okay.